Good morning. How are you today?
Hey, good
Hi,
morning. Doing
TJ.
all right.
It's great to
Trying to
see
hide from
you.
work a little bit. Good to see
Great.
you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. So, we're here to celebrate the release of your new novel, The Hemingway Deception. And I am so excited to have you with us today with our first live broadcast. So, give us the pitch for your elevator pitch for The Hemingway Deception.
Wow, jump right in with both feet and no parachute. Okay. Well, as I often say to people when they ask me, the first thing I got to do is I got to push the emergency button to keep a captive audience in the elevator because, people only have so much attention span. But basically, this story is about two very strong women, and both of them are forced into a very treacherous mission, and each one comes from a different angle. They're both plagued by their past. One is trying to return to her past to regain her strengths, and the other is trying to escape it. While they're on this mission, both of them are sort of circling around this unknown threat from Washington. And Havana and Washington, both of them are trying to stop them before this mission is complete. And the whole key to this whole thing is an operative called Hemingway. And that is the key to the whole story plot right there.
That's so exciting. What is something that impacted you about the Hemingway Deception?
Wow, so many things. Probably the most important thing for me was that in my previous novels, I've always written strong male characters, and there's always been a strong female lead there too, but the story didn't center around them. In this case, thanks to my brilliant agent, Kimberly Cameron, we went on a different path. We decided to make a very strong set of female characters and put them in the world that I'm used to being in with male characters. So I said, sure, Kimberly, I'll try that. I've never done it before. And, as I started off on it, you know, I was wondering if my feminine side was going to sort of come out on this because I've been teased about that in the past that I can sort of be a chameleon between characters. But, as I started going through it, I worried about a lot of things. And what really gave me the way to stay on my path was I raised two daughters who are very strong people in their own right.
Yeah.
I've got eight grandkids, but I've got five granddaughters, and
Wow.
every one of them is a force. Uh, and a couple of the youngest are a force on me like every day. So I won't say I studied them, but I sort of used them when I was plotting what a character was doing and said, what would Jean do? What would Lindsay do? How would this impact Rayon or Catherine or any of the others? And I've got different age groups. So when it came to Michaela, who's the oldest, I was
Hmm.
able to sort of say, how would she make the transition? And then Riley, who's in the middle, she's in those teenage years. So I was able to sort of try to capture what this would do to all of them. Um, and it was working, and it kind of bugged me because I sort of felt like I was betraying myself as an author of male strong dominant characters. And I often say when I get behind a power curve or I get stressed out, I jump at my Harley and go riding. I did a lot of writing while I was writing this book. I can tell you that right now.
What other kind of writing were you doing while you were writing this book?
Well, I tend to always be outlining future stories, but I have to write professionally in my career a tremendous
Yes.
amount of writing. So I'm always switching between real life and novels, and that's sometimes kind of hard to do.
I can imagine it was difficult to meld the different personalities that you had eh, for the girls in your life and bring them into your characters.
Um,
I mean, because
yeah, it's
you have the different age groups, but they're vastly different personalities, aren't they?
oh my God, you know, every weekend I'm cooking for at least half the family, if not most of the family, and there can be as many as 20 people on my deck while I'm cooking, and to
That's
watch the
wonderful.
interaction. Yeah, well, when you watch the interaction, depending upon what's happened in the family, sometimes there's stress, sometimes there's not. But I have to constantly be bobbing and weaving and looking for the action going on between these girls because they are on fire most of the time, particularly the youngest. They are on fire.
That's amazing. So, how was writing this book, besides the female to male thing, how is this different than your other books?
Um, well, I think that was probably the biggest thing was writing with female leads.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, I write in a couple different genres. I got started accidentally writing paranormal murder mysteries, which that's different from me, right? I'm a thriller writer. I mean, I work in the terrorism world. But it was different when I moved into writing thrillers without sort of the tongue-in-cheek stuff that I did with my paranormal murder mysteries. So that was sort of a transition. And while I was writing this, I was always also writing my latest paranormal sequel to the Tucker murder mystery series that my agent right now is trying to resell as the Dead Detective Case Files. So I was sort of back and forth between those two genres. Um, One of the things I found, maybe it's not exactly the answer, but I think one of the things I found was that there are parts of my stories that are always constant. One of that is, my characters are always flawed. They're not James Bond. They're not any of the
Yes.
superheroes. They're really normal people who make mistakes, get in jams. Uh, my lead characters are almost always sarcastic, and if not, there's a main character in there that is. So those things sort of played a big role in all of my stories as we went through going, working one book to the next to the next. So those were probably the most important things for me right there. That they weren't the big differences, but at the same time, I had to curb them to make sure that they didn't impact the story negatively.
And the setting for the Hemingway Deception, how did that impact the book, and how did it come from real life?
Oh, well, the settings. All of my stories are based on places that I've lived or operated or worked in, with one exception. In Hemingway, there are some scenes in Havana, Cuba, and I've never been to Havana, but Google has, so I was able to capture that. And a couple of my friends have been to Havana, so I was able to tap into those resources. But all of my stories, I try to bring something to them for scenes that people can relate to. Of course, I have to change the names of some things, et cetera. So in
Right.
this story, there's a lot of it that takes place in Manhattan and Queens, and I spend a lot of time in Manhattan on business, working as a consultant with Homeland.
Mhm.
So when I've been up there, I've taken a lunch or a late evening, and I've gone out and I've researched some of the places I wanted to be. There's some major scenes right along the park in sort of the ritzy part of Manhattan, and I'm surprised I didn't get arrested. I took a lot of pictures, took a lot of notes. Some people have accused me of looking like a terrorist at times. So those things played a big role. And one of the things I always also try to do is capture what is it about the area that is important for a reader to know,
Mhm.
and what does it do for my story. So in Manhattan, one of the key things is this very posh townhouse that's worth like 10 million bucks. It took me several days to research it, but I was driving home the lifestyle of a main character, and when that character fell through, and you realized who he really was, that you sort of connected the dots and said, "Oh, now I get what is important about Manhattan in this area." And then also, so Queens is a big Greek community, and Anna Karis is a Colombian Greek. So I wanted to make sure that that resonated with people that didn't read the story and go, "Oh, there's no Greeks that live there." And I lived in Greece for many years, so I wanted to make sure I was fairly accurate in that. And then, of course, down in Latin America, some of the places I've traveled and worked, in Washington, which is my stomping grounds. All of those played a key role to form what the action was and the themes of the novel.
That's amazing that you can pull all of those different themes together to produce your novel, and make each one so very different.
Well, let's hope so.
So I was shopping over the weekend, and I was able to snag one of your copies of Dying to Know. And so I was so excited to get
Really?
a copy of that. Yes.
Wow. That publisher sold off, went out of business, and it's hard to find copies. So good for you.
I know, I was really thrilled. So as I was looking at it, I was wondering, you write in very different genres. And what's the best part of crossing genres as you're writing and doing, one book in the more paranormal mystery and one in the thriller category?
Well, the best part. So over the years, I wrote my first book right out of high school, and it was terrible. But I continued dabbling around, and I didn't really get serious till about 10 or 12 years ago. But over the years, I sort of kept notes and outlines of stories I wanted to write. Now, nowhere in that pile was a paranormal murder mystery about a detective who dies and comes back and solves his own crime. That's got a story all by itself. But I'm able to cross genres and write things that I want to write. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not famous. I'm not a bestseller yet. Maybe one day, I hope. But I get to write the stories that I want to write and reach out to the audiences with the kind of characters that I like. So I write for myself a lot. So the paranormals were the ability for me to take two very important parts of the story. One, the paranormal element, and then the historical subplots. And the only way for me to connect the present day murder mystery with a historical truth was using the paranormal as sort of a tool. So that allowed me to do that, fairly well. And also it gives me the opportunity to bring characters in that represent important people in my life, like my mentor Wally. He was one of the last OSS operatives from World War II. He was also the deputy director of the CIA and my mentor for almost 25 years. And he is in almost every book. And only the most recent no, because he passed about 5 years ago. So I've sort of had to let go of that. But it lets me bring these people in, and they work better in some genres than others. So those are the things that I like the most about crossing over between genres.
It sounds like you're keeping him alive as making him a part of your books.
I am, and some of his friends, even from the agency, who have read my books, have said that I was kind of lucky, I guess, that I captured him
Yeah.
in truth, mostly in the consultant, because he is certainly Oscar LaRue, right down to the polishing of his glasses every 15 minutes. Regretfully, he never saw that book. He saw it in first draft, and it wasn't finished yet. And I spent the weekend with him when he died, and I was writing another book, and he said, "Stop! I want you to finish the consultant." And I did. And then I went back and added a bunch more chapters in his name, just to honor him a little bit. But he was also a pain in the neck, so he got what he got.
Now, you kind of teased us a little bit with some information about the fact that you're working on your next book. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, actually, I'll say there's three, if I can. I wrote a fourth installment of the Oliver Tucker mysteries, which are now entitled The Dead Detective Case Files. That is with my agent, Kimberly.
Hmm.
Uh, we're hoping to resell the entire first three and then add the fourth one on. She's looking at a publisher now who might be interested. One way or the other, it will get out there. I'm hoping through this publisher that I'm with right now. So that is just the next installment of the Oliver Tucker series, where a dead detective solves crimes and he brings in the historical past of some big historical subplot that is always real and then woven into his lifestyle. And that one right now is titled "Dying with a Secret." And then she's also got a thriller not associated with the consultant or Hemingway. And I'm going to leave the title out for a good reason. But she's shopping that around, and it's the story of a has-been intelligence operative who failed his last mission, and he's been a lonely PI the rest of his life. He's now pushing his 50s. He's sore. He's got old man stuff like I do, and he's sort of stumbles upon a new threat that's coming at him, and it turns into a much larger problem and a national crisis that he gets involved with. And then the third one, if I can, is just a sequel to that story because I really love it and I love the characters, and I'm hoping that when it sells, they'll want to have a sequel to it. And I'm not going to say much about that except it takes the character to the next level now that he's sort of wormed his way back into government service.
Wow, TJ, it sounds like you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, and then I have to do these interviews, and
Well, I mean, I've been reading your blog posts and your Facebook messages and stuff, and it looks like you really get out there and spend a lot of time with the public and marketing, and you really enjoy that, don't you?
I do, and the brilliance behind it is amazing, isn't it? Um, yeah, it's different for me. I've used these types of things in the past, not always successful, but I work full time, and by full time I mean 50, 60 hours a week. I
Right.
write in my free time. I do a lot of other things, and but that's important. So I've gone down a different path this time to show how important it is to me, and hopefully build a bigger fan base.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned your job and your full-time work. So how does that affect your writing?
Wow. First of all, I have to be very careful with it that I don't end up in jail. I'm an anti-terrorism consultant with a think tank in Washington supporting Department of Homeland Security in an anti-terrorism world. So I travel a lot. I get to do things that I love to do. I'm
Hmm.
not, a swashbuckler anymore. Those days are gone. I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that, but it does allow me to do some really fun, interesting work, and I work with some just amazing people. So between that and my former life as a COO of a consulting firm and a government agent, I've got tons of material. If I need a bad guy to be a certain way, I'm sure I've met one. If I need good guys, if I need, the slacker in the office or somebody I just wanted to slap, uh, all these people I've been around, and I've kept good notes. So the first thing it does is it gives me a very long list and a very long resume of research material. So that helps. It
Yeah.
also keeps me sort of in touch with what's going on in the industry and in the world of politics and terrorism and intelligence stuff. I have to be very careful, and I am. I would never disclose anything that I learn about a client or about a government program. So I have to be really careful with that. But it does give my stories, I think, a lot of credibility because there are no James Bonds, right? There are no Jason Bournes. This is real life stuff with real people who act and operate in as close to realism as I can, short
Hmm.
of stepping over the line.
So, with your traveling, do you have much time to read? And if so, what kind of genres do you prefer and authors?
Well, I love to read a book. I have it in my hands,
Hmm.
sitting in my office or outside on the deck, but I don't have very much time for that.
Yeah.
So probably 95% of my reading is in my Jeep, either driving into DC for work, traveling to a book event, or going on an assignment for Homeland. But that's quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of it, books on tape. I love books on tape. I've been doing it for years as my traveling has intensified and then gone through different phases. So, I've probably got 1,000 volumes uh, in my basement in books, and then I probably got 100 on my cell phone waiting for me to read whatever comes out. But I read all over the place, but my real favorites has to start with James Grady, who was the author of 6 Days of the Condor and three sequels. An amazing guy. He was my hero when I was a teenager. One of the reasons I
Hmm.
got into writing. Nelson DeMille, who needs no introduction, and now I think it's his son that's writing with him. Old guys like Alistair MacLean. You can't beat anything McLean has ever written. And then modern people, Doug Preston and Lincoln Child are some of my favorite adventure writers. Right, so their stuff is just amazing. Long, dense, but those are the ones that when I have to drive somewhere or spend a week on the road, I can go through one. Strangely, Sandra Brown, right? So when I was working on the Hemingway, I did a lot of research about female characters and strong female leads, and I used her books for research, and I really enjoyed them. Probably wouldn't say that out loud in the office, but she's one of my heroes too. And then a lot of the writers I know, right? D.P. Lyle, R.G. Belsky, Matt Coyle, Terry Shames, Bruce Coughlin, Baron Bircher, Bill Rapp, Tom Sloan, Don Brotherton, so many of them. And I mention these folks in blogs a lot. But they're everybody from people like me who haven't really made it yet, all the way up to the biggest names in the business. I will read virtually anything in those areas.
That sounds so great. Now, what advice do you have for other writers?
Ha! Run, hide, save yourself now. Um, you know, I will probably tell you something that I've been told over the years by a lot of people and some big names, including my literary agent. Um, at the end of the day, don't give up because it only takes one book, one blog to totally change uh, what your standing is with fans, and got to have thick skin. I mean, I've had reviews where somebody says, "Oh, I hate your cover." Oh, and the editing was bad. And I go, "Hey, great. How'd you like the story?" Because I got no control over that, right? Um, and at the same time, there's fans that just rave about you that you said, Jesus, I wish another 10,000 people would read it and read your
Right.
review. But you got to have thick skin because you can't, you got to figure out what you're writing for. Me, I write for myself. And luckily my agent is wonderful enough to keep getting me published. And then the other thing is, as you're going through it, every review, if you bother to read them, I don't read very many, but I read some. When you go to conferences, when you meet other writers, listen, shut up and listen, right? You're going to learn a lot from these people. And if nothing else, I always say this to people who ask me or tell me they want to be a writer. You know, I live in a professional world where there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of driven people, high A personalities, and some of them are just in it for themselves. And if you ask them for help, good luck. Writers are not that way, with the exception of maybe three or four I can count on my fingers I've met over the last 20 years. They are all wonderful people. If you send out an email and say, "Help, I'm stuck on something," you're going to get 20 replies. You
That's
go to a
amazing.
conference, yeah, and you go to a conference, and these people will do anything to help each other out because we're all in it together. And that's not a euphemism. That's the way that most writers act. And I would encourage anybody that wants to write to get into those communities because they're going to be amazed at how great these people are.
That's fabulous. Now, you mentioned conferences. I think you have two pretty big ones coming up, don't you?
Well, I've got a bunch of them coming up. This Saturday, I'm going to be at Murder as You Like It up in Mechanicsburg at a book event all day. I'll be on a panel. I'll be doing some other things. And then 2 weeks later, I'm at Killer Nashville, a fantastic convention every year. And this year, I think Clay was saying that he's got like 400 authors.
Oh,
There'll be
wow.
fans and authors and other things. I'm going to miss BoucherCon this year, but I'll be there next year. And then I do a lot of very unusual things, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to do a fan convention called Monster Mania up in Philadelphia in a couple months, and that's obviously the monster genre. But I learned a few years ago that you know you become a vendor, you pay a couple bucks, you sit there and you talk to people. I sell a lot of books. I
Yeah.
meet a lot of people, even though there's no monsters in my story, but they're creative people, right? And they're looking for uh, movies, they're looking for books, they're looking for all kinds of things that are sort of escapisms, and that's a great crowd. I've got Creature Feature coming up in about a month and a half. I'll be down in Suffolk. I think I'll be in Suffolk, Virginia. I haven't heard back yet if I'm going to get accepted. And then there's five or six others that are great one dayers or half dayers that I'll be on the road about 2 weekends a month between now and next summer.
Wow, that's a lot, TJ. So, in those 2, 3 hours you have left after writing and working and visiting all your fans, what do you enjoy doing?
Well, I like to sleep now and then. Not much, but I do. Uh, Writing is not a chore to me. I mean, I think a lot of writers will tell you this, despite what we put in blogs. We love it, and it is a way for me to stay as sane as I can possibly be. And there's question about that in the public eye. But I ride my Harley a lot. It keeps me sane. I spend a lot of time with my dogs. I'm called a man about dogs, and I do a lot of stuff as a papa. I've got the grandkids, and a couple of them are here a lot, and I spend as much time with them as I can. Because when I was a young father, I was gone 3, 4 weeks a month, and sometimes I'd go to work on a Monday morning, come back 3 weeks a month later. So I'm trying to make up for that, and
Mhm.
having a great time with my family.
That's amazing. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to ask you a personal question. I
Uh-oh.
saw on your Facebook page a couple weeks ago that you had a movie marathon with the kids. 4th of July, I think.
Yeah.
So tell us how that got started and give us some information about that.
Well, it's a long and painful detail, but I have been an old black and white sci-fi and horror movie buff since I was a kid, and it got started in a very difficult way. I had sort of a rough childhood, and I used to sneak off and do things. I mean, there's a story how the Hardy Boys saved my life once. But
Yes.
when I was very young, we lived in a scout camp in upstate New York in the Appalachian Mountains, and somebody, and I don't know who, had given my older brother and I a small, tiny little black and white TV, rabbit ears and all that stuff. And we hid it in our room. And we used to stay up until 11, 12 o'clock at night watching the late, 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 late show. And I think it was WGN out of Chicago, but I can't remember. And they often played, the old black and white mobster movies, and they played monster movies and old sci-fis. And I sort of got hooked on those. It was an escape, from my father. Um, Strangely, one night we got caught, and after getting my butt whipped, he took the TV and stuffed it in the basement.
Mhm.
But he wasn't the biggest genius in the world, because a few weeks later he moved my brother into the basement for a bedroom. So I used to sneak down there and we'd turn the TV on and keep watching WGN and all the monster movies. But that stuck. So over the years, I love them. I've got a big collection, Creature of the Black Lagoon, The Blob, Plan 9 from Outer Space. You name it, I've got it. And my eldest daughter, Jean, took a liking to them when she was a child. So once a year, when my wife takes off on her own vacation with her extended family, we sit, I make a big dinner. We sit and we watch old monster films and old sci-fi stuff. And last year, we started including some of the older grandkids. Uh, some of them took to them, some of them didn't. My one of my grandsons, Jaden, said we were watching the original Mummy movies, and he kind of thought they were stupid. Uh, but he loved doing it with us, right? Because he just couldn't believe that me and my daughter were so captivated by all this. But he heard the stories that went around with him, and then one of my youngest granddaughters, Raylan, she watches him with me whenever I'm there, but she just sits there and laughs at him. They were playing the Blob one night, and she sat there laughing, telling me how stupid it was, but she liked the music. And if you remember the Blob, it's got old I don't even know what you call beatnik music, I guess it was, right?
It's
But
been
you
years.
know, yeah, and I just love that stuff. I absolutely love those old films. It's an escape, right? And that's those are the things I love the most about it.
I'm so glad that out of something that was so difficult came something wonderful for your family.
Well, yeah, and that's why I write. I mean, I got started when I was young, as an escapism reading, and I had
Mhm.
wonderful grandparents that visited once in a while, and they would bring me books, and that's when I started reading and writing and just escaping that way. And you're right, it is something good for me and my family that came out of a crappy situation.
Well, it's wonderful. And I am honored to say I get to see you this weekend at the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. And
Oh,
that's
you're gonna
going to
be there?
be an exciting, yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. Good,
yeah, I'm
good, good.
excited. I get to see everybody and come and visit. So we will see each other this weekend again.
Sounds like a plan.
Terrific. Thank you so much for visiting with me today, TJ. It's been an
Well,
honor.
thank you. I really appreciate all that you do for me, and Partners in Crime has been a fantastic forum for authors over the years. I think I've worked with you guys probably since my first book, and it's been nothing but a pleasure. And you guys do great work for authors, and thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I will see you later. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
be safe and well.
You too. Bye bye.